Hi everyone, my name is Nat and welcome to our Thursday webinars. Every week we go into a deep dive in a new subject related to the complexity that is the human brain. Today we are looking at autism or high functioning. What is it? Why is it? Was it a thing? Is it a thing? Is it politically correct to say? It's a bit of a minefield. Most of you may not be surprised to know it's a bit of a dud term. Maybe the bigger question is, why? What's so wrong with it? Are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Or is there still something we can gain from using that label? I was diagnosed with high functioning autism. It wasn't until I got older, I was like researching, I was like, wait a sec, in the UK, it's not a thing. But yet it was still very widely used. And even to this day, if you were to search academic articles and type in high functioning autism, you still get recent studies to this day. Is this just ignorance or is there still merit in it? Let's explore. We are focusing on autism or a previous subset of autism. Typically, we cover the whole spectrum. Maybe that's not even the right word. We are going to be looking at that as well today. Here's a picture of myself being very high functioning autistic. That doesn't even mean anything because the whole idea is about it not being visible. When we talk about high functioning autism, rather than talking about characteristics, we are predominantly talking about IQ and intelligence, which is a little bit of a misnomer when we are actually looking at what autism is. Oh, Lauren says, I think high functioning just means high masking. Lauren, that is a big part of it, but there is way more under the surface. Well, that's just not the case, and we will explore that. Here's our team. You got myself and you got April today. Ask us anything, ideally related to autism, but genuinely ask us anything. And as I said, we do webinars all the time. But the last week we did dyspraxia in 40s. And this was a nice subject because you try looking up other research on the internet, it doesn't exist. But dyspraxia does not go away in adulthood, just like autism doesn't go away. It is absolutely lifelong. Let's understand high functioning autism. It's a term that is synonymous with autism, arguably interchangeable with Asperger's. Both of them are incorrect, and one of them is super incorrect. This little image here is kind of the view that for many years, starting from the 80s, is what we understood about the spectrum. We always talk about autism as a spectrum, but I think one of the fatal flaws is they think a spectrum is A to Z when actually it's three-dimensional. To understand where we currently are, we need to go back a little bit. On this spectrum, you've got people who are neurotypical, more or less can get around in day-to-day life. Then you have those who are high functioning. You would never know they have autism. They're just hiding it. Then you got those who cannot hide the autism. They just had to let it out. They're here. Then you have the low functioning autism. These are people who they are not going to be able to do well in life. They're going to need support care. You'll notice as the level of autism goes, the amount of support or severity goes up quite dramatically. Oh, Alice has said, only 15% of autistics people are in long-term employment. So high function can probably be interpreted as still being able to function like neurotypicals and keep a job, interact with others, etc. Like someone else said, probably simply means high masking. Do you know, Alice, that is part of it, but genuinely there is more to it and we will cover that because if we just go under that idea, we are doing a massive disservice to a big section of the autistic community. This session's not really about trying to persuade people either way. Honestly, it's an outdated term and really should be phased out. The fact that people still use it means we should probably still talk about it because we're on a journey. That's okay. Quick disclaimer, for educational purposes only, high-functioning autism is now defunct. Avoid self-diagnosis, seek a professional, all the good stuff. This is just to help educate. Oh, Matthew says, doesn't high-functioning imply there are those of us with autism who are low-functioning? It seems ableist. We have strengths and weaknesses in different areas that need to be recognized. You are absolutely right, Matthew. Sometimes by bigging up some of us, we're unfortunately putting some of the rest of us down or in a bit of a box. We are capping someone's expectations, either low or high. That's a lot of pressure or quite diminishing, no matter where you are. Yes, a spiky profile is a much more progressive way of talking about autism because it's appreciating that, of course, there are highs and lows, but they are different for everyone. And it's not that you have so many that you're high functioning, it's that you could have some qualities which may be more support driven, but you might have other qualities that you are far exceeding. It sees people as people rather than a binary process. Here are some quick terms just to make sure we all know what we're talking about, because I'm going to be using these throughout the session. The triad of impairments, essentially social communication challenges, social interaction difficulties, and repetitive behavior. Autism spectrum condition is talking about a broad term relating to multiple related conditions. Then we got the spectrum. This is a range of autistic conditions. A developmental brain disorder. This is essentially how the brain develops very early on from womb or birth. And that can relate to autism, but it also can relate to other things. Good question, Lucy. Social communication is when you're speaking with people, you're conversing, you're listening to what they have to say, you're comprehending. And social interaction is more like facial expressions, body movements, how you interact in social environments. Then we've got neurotypical. These are people without autism, but also without other neurodivergence, such as dyslexia, dyspraxia. IQ level, this is going to be a hot topic for today. This is the varying among those with ASD, essentially kind of your intelligence. If you had over 70 IQ, maybe high functioning. If you had low, maybe low functioning. Social interactions, challenges in social communication barriers, difficulty expressing, social interest, a focused interest, and Asperger's syndrome, previous high functioning autistic. This is going to be another interesting one. The Asperger's and high functioning are not the same, but I would say Asperger's kind of falls within high functioning, or there's like slight little differences to how they present themselves. Maybe high functioning goes more under the radar. We will see. I want to know, honestly, do you use the term high functioning? Yes, or maybe no, or sometimes. Okay, nice. It's interesting because the term, it cringe. Yeah, I get it, Matthew. People still use it though, really often. Hence why we're doing this today. Here, you'll see a lovely little image, and this is quite a binary way of looking at neurodiversity. Sometimes it's easier to see things in a flat way than a 3D way. We've got lots of different brain types, all of them together are neurodiversity, appreciating human beings have different brains. We have neurotypicals who have more or less a brain that functions like society had created. Then we got those who think a little bit different, maybe neurodivergent, you could be dyslexic, autistic, whatever. If your brain thinks significantly different, you have autism. If you don't have autism, you're allistic. If you're high functioning, maybe you'd be about here, just on the tip of the autistic brain. Not right there, but just between the gap. That is one way of looking at it. Question to all of you, why do you think we no longer use the term high functioning anymore? Why do we use it? Let me know. There's not really a right or wrong thing here. Let me know what you're thinking. Why don't we use high functioning anymore? My mum thinks the term sounds robotic. Yeah, I can see that. It gives an inaccurate impression of autism. I think it's like a painting, but a little bit more abstract. Offensive, because who defines functioning? The dictionary. But no, I totally know what you're saying and where you're coming from. Gives an ideal person is almost perfect in every way. Yep, it says you've got those who are great, those who are not so great, and you just happen to be the problem. It diminishes the need of a big part of the community. Absolutely. You're fine, mate. You got high function autism. Why don't you take a C? You clearly don't need this support, which is on offer. All of these are pretty great. Before we can honestly answer that question, why we don't use it, we do have to ask some other questions to get a little bit more insight. Oh, Lauren says it's an ableist term. Quite a solid term. It can depend on circumstances. It might say I'm ALO support needs instead. But at the same time, it depends on the time and day situation and when I am marked, when I realize I have high support needs. It's just a color wheel situation again. I completely agree with you. Gregory says, handy term because of the shortage of specific definitions of where we are in the spectrum. Problematic because we are so spiky. I like that. Pros and cons. I think I do appreciate that. We aren't continuously in one static point. life is complicated and our needs do change over time. What is high functioning autism? This is again another way of looking at it. Say this is the whole spectrum of abilities. You've got your neurotypicals. This doesn't mean the right way of thinking. It just means the typical way of thinking. Then you've got your allistic category. You're not autistic, but let's face it, you're a little bit quirky. There's something going on there. Then you've got those who are neurodivergent. This might be those who resonate with dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. Then you've got this other area. Well, we got the middle one, which is autistic. I would say this kind of gap in between autistic and neurodivergent is typically where someone who is high functioning may go. Maybe they don't quite meet the criteria of full-blown classic autism, or maybe they find enough difficulty in day-to-day life that they wouldn't be allistic because, again, those challenges are real. Appreciate this is a very flat way of looking at it, but it gives you an idea. I'd say maybe right on the line. Matthew says high functioning seems to define itself in the face of allistic expectations. At the same time, what is almost generate other co-autistics who have more visible struggles. One thing is, people think those who are high functioning may not need support in anything. They might need support more, but it doesn't seem as obvious. So they have, over a course of a lifetime, significantly more struggles because there is less support. Hannah says, doesn't show the less visible needs someone has and adds to the pressure they may feel to meet external expectations set by others. High functioning is a term used by others to say, I don't need to make adjustments for you because you seem fine. Mic drop. That is really, you're a smart audience today, may I say. It is a term which is probably, though it is not a medical term, and we will get onto that, it probably relates more to the medical model of disability rather than a social model of disability, because it is the outside saying you the problem or you don't have a problem. Saying you don't have a problem is equally as bad as someone saying you have a problem, because it means that you aren't deserving of support. High functional autism is a misleading term that challenges. Do you agree or think that it is IQ centric? It's all about your cognitive ability. What about, does it underestimate support needs? Maybe it's misleading, neglects social/emotional aspects, ignores broad challenges, or promotes misconceptions. I can see you selecting all of them. I just wanted a couple. They're all correct, aren't they, really? This image is quite a good one where it shows you how it is a very A to Z spectrum. And you feel like, okay, I have an IQ, high functioning. It feels like the hat on Harry Potter. It's not like that. You can change hats throughout the day, from moment to moment. It really doesn't work like that. Oh, underestimate support needs. Yep, that is a big one. Rather than telling you what you are, it's telling you what you don't need. That just ain't helpful. Oh, question. Which of these do you agree with? A, yes. Yeah, they all are part of it. I will say though, if any of you were diagnosed with high functioning autism, you might be like me and feel like a bit of a no man's land, because it's offensive if I say what I have, but I feel an imposter if I say something that I wasn't diagnosed with. You become in this little bit of grey area. On this one, I want you, just for a fun exercise, pin where you believe you would be if we still use this spectrum idea. Lindsay says, how can Asperger's be replaced with high functioning? Yeah, high functioning was told it is high IQ. Mine is average, not high IQ. That is the difference, because Asperger's isn't predominantly around IQ, where high functioning is. When we say high IQ, we're honestly not talking about a rocket scientist. A lot of you, interestingly, would resonate with being high functioning. Low functioning, no one's put that. Autism, no one's put that. High functioning, a lot of people, someone who I guess you would say is allistic. I do think this is quite an interesting representation, because like I said, a lot of us has agreed it's not a helpful term, but most of us had still voluntarily put ourselves in that box. What are the biggest downsides to high functioning autism? Does it overlook variability too much? Does it distort perception or hinder insight? Again, you only got to pick one in this one, and I will look at the one that is the biggest downer. Right, let's see. Oh, it's a joint tie. An award goes to simplifies autism and distorts perceptions. I think that is spot on. If we look at this autism iceberg, you'll notice that when we say high functioning, for example, you may only think, or maybe someone, oh, they have a unique perspective. They're very good at focusing, very dedicated, attention to detail, very honest. And don't get me wrong, these are all great assets to have. If someone is that amazing, why would we ever bother giving them any additional support? But it's just thoughts, perceptions, because under that iceberg, we still have social challenges. We still have difficulty with change. Communication, interpretation can still be a barrier, repetitive behavior, sensory stimulation, and more and more. If anything, it's like getting a picture frame and just showing the top part rather than acknowledging the entire individual. This is something that the term high functioning doesn't care about. I want to know, do you require tailored communication? Do you prefer to have a sensory friendly environment, not too bright, not too loud? Do you require social skills support? What about emotional support? Or do you require accommodations for work? These are all things that those with autism may require or need. If you think that these are useful things to take into consideration, that is when you might want to look at something called the bimodel. This is used to look and understand, say, mental health, being, neurodivergent needs. What it is doing is it's saying, rather than just being one element, which is saying you do or you don't, it's taking a holistic, multifaceted approach. Your biology, what is actually part of you from the day you were born? What about social? So the environment you were born up, your family, your friends, your school, the people who kind of shape and mold you. Psychological, how your brain is actually processing things, the strain, the wear, what it goes from day to day, is all these three elements that create your well-being. And that is the best way to monitor the type of support you may or may not need. It also appreciates that these elements can change over time, particularly environmental. The first one would be like genetics, and that'd be environmental, and then we've got psychological. Most of you have put emotional support. It's helping us navigate day-to-day situations can be challenging, sensory environments, tailored communication. Accommodations for work are useful, but they tend to be more useful for those conditions that aren't necessarily autistic. Lindsay says, I didn't understand something. Undiagnosed children, how did everyone else know how to do things, when and what to say to others? Yeah, it's hard to know, isn't it? The overall thing is that if we were to use this label, it really neglects social, sensory, and mental health struggles. These are arguably the biggest barriers to navigating day-to-day life rather than IQ. IQ isn't that important. IQ doesn't tell you whether you can or can't do something. It's actually quite a limiting metric. Not a useless metric, still not overly helpful in these aspects. It assumes self-reliance, meaning you don't need any help. You're good on your own. Off you go. It downplays communication. It assumes that just because you can talk the talk, that you understand the talk, and it means you're on the same page and there ain't going to be any misunderstandings. It ignores the emotional aspects, that it can take a real big toll on your mental well-being, living in a world that just doesn't get you. It also limits the support that you may be eligible for. It puts you too much in a box. All the support is in all the other boxes. This diagram here is your classic one of what you think. In a real simple nutshell, high functioning means less autistic, low functioning means more autistic. People just think and that's where you are. This absolutely is not true. The spectrum is not linear. This is something that really hit home, is not linear. This is something I'll ask you, and let's face it, we know the answer. What would you rather be called? Would you rather be called high functioning or low functioning? These are the terms that we get to pick from. Pick your poison. You get no choice. You're getting a label regardless of whether you want it or not. Which one would you rather be called? What? Everyone wants high functioning. I thought we all said how bad it was. Why doesn't anyone want low functioning? There we are. One person wants it. Maybe just for the hell of it. This is the thing, right? Let's say we go with high functioning. Actually, despite all the things I've said, it's still a label you resonate with. It is a little bit more empowering. It's saying, you know what? You can do it. It is creating a class system. You've got your first class, high functioning, and your low second class, low functionings. It's saying one is better than the other. One of you has potential in society. The other one of you, good luck getting a job at McDonald's. Ain't going to happen. The point remains is that it tells you what you can or can't do. It's not you telling you what you can or can't do. It's society. You're low functioning, of course you're going into a special needs school. You're low functioning, of course you're going on benefits. You're low functioning, of course you're not going to get a relationship. You can see how it tells you about you without you telling yourself about yourself. Low functioning has even worse connotations. Or April says, I chose high functioning because I resonate with it more. Or Stacey said, I think personally, as an Asian person, if I used the term low functioning, it would help people understand that my need would be seen as more valid. But yes, it would more likely be viewed as negative. It's a tough balance. But thanks for that comment. We've got cultural perception. Then we got stigma. Landunda says, my strong sense of justice will not allow me to indirectly speak that way about low functioning people, so I just don't use it. I think that's good, because do we really want to put someone else down to make ourselves feel better? Oh, asking about the comparison, not the person. But yeah. Here for stigma, we've got it reinforces harmful labels. Again, by saying one person can do something, we're saying someone else can't do something. It deepens stereotypes, those who can do things, those who can't do things, those with superpowers, those with disadvantages. It divides community. You get support, you don't get support. It impacts self-esteem. I'm a big old smarty pants, but yeah, I'm still struggling. Why am I still struggling? And I'm definitely never going to amount to anything. Why should I even try? So you can see that these labels are not great, and they have much wider impacting consequences than simply your own personal opinions on what isn't. That being said, we talked about how bad it is. What is the right way to talk about autism? Autism is very much in flux. It's changing every few seconds. Should we be talking about functioning levels? Is it the best of a bad bunch? Should we be talking about the spectrum view, that it is more of a three-dimensional thing and it depends where you are? Should we be talking about the medical model? That's like diagnostic labels, dyslexic, dyspraxia, autistic, ADHD. Should we talk about it in a neurodiversity aspect, that cognitive diversity is a perfectly natural thing? Get over it. Or should we be talking about the social model, that, you know what, it is society that is causing the barriers, but it's still a bit negative? My personal opinion, high functioning, get rid of it. Spectrum view, I think definitely has a lot of merits to it. Medical model is useful for clinicians. I don't think it's useful for day-to-day public, even though we do have to use a lot of those labels because it's what people know of. Neurodiversity is a very good neutral term because it isn't saying good nor bad. It is just saying it is. The social model is a more accurate way of describing the challenges that do exist with neurodivergence, but it is also coming at it from a little bit of a biased perspective, maybe. You tell me. I don't know if there is a right answer, and even still, the terms may change over time. We do tend to be shifting to more of a spectrum view. This acknowledges diversity. It's the thing. It rejects binary labels. So you're not just autistic, high functioning, low functioning. You can be anywhere on this spectrum, and it can change over time. It does mean that your support is tailored to you. So every individual gets a tailored support plan rather than just an out-of-the-box cookie-cutter approach. Employ inclusivity, because ideally it's not othering people because we are all on this big wheel. Rejects realities and encourages understanding. This may be an easier way for people to understand how autism actually affects someone. Let's say stimming. You might say, oh yeah, that really affects me, or it doesn't really affect me. But this may change over time during different circumstances. If society was more aware of how ND affects development, the medical model would be more relevant. I'm not completely against the medical model. I just think people who aren't medical professionals probably lean on it a bit too heavily. Alice said, devil's advocate, but neurodiversity is also not a great term because it implies there is a normality which we do not belong to. Do you know what, Alice? I see where you're coming from. Normal shouldn't mean correct, but there is a normal. And our world has been created for that normal. It's only normal because that has been the majority over a portion of time. Had the world developed slightly differently, maybe it would be different. You're being devil's advocate there. What else would we call it? Neurodiversity is all of humanity. Neurodivergent identifies that we have a different brain wiring. Yeah, neurodiversity, very positive term. Neurodivergence is just appreciating the fact that our brain works different to how 9 out of 10 people process the world. Does this spectrum view apply just to autism spectrum or to a range of neurodivergent conditions in general? It can apply to all of them. Arguably more effective for autism just because there has been much more stigma over people's understanding of autism throughout the years. But yeah, it could apply to any of them. If any of you do disagree with what I'm saying, do let me know. There aren't necessarily right or wrong answers here. Let's summarize. Why don't we use high functioning autism anymore? Which one of these are correct? Is it because it is imprecise and misleading? Does it oversimplify? Does it ignore varied support needs, contribute to further stigma, or a spectrum view is better because it recognizes needs? They are all true, and it definitely does oversimplify. We used to have a whole heap of labels, and then we traded them in for one label to rule them all. Why? Because let's say you have Asperger's or autism, right? And you fit right in the middle. It means you do not get support. Autism spectrum condition, it's a lot more inclusive. It means more people get support, and it appreciates that we're all individual and different. While it does unintentionally make it harder to talk about a person's specific character profile in order to give them support, it pushes us towards getting to know someone on a more individual basis rather than just looking at a bit of paper and say, got ya, now I know what to do with that information. Let's go back and do a little bit of history. The DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, which is predominantly used in the US, but is also used around the world quite heavily as well. In the 80s, autism was still very rarely spoken about how we do today. We had infantile autism, predominantly for children. This is probably the nearest to high functioning. We've got distortion in the development of multiple basic psychiatric functions that are involved in the development of social skills and languages that cannot be classified as either infantile autism or child onset. What we're learning here, autism is for children. If for some reason you're an adult, we'll put you in the other category. That is what this is saying. In 1994, we got an upgrade. This is when most people's understanding of autism comes from. 1994, what a great year. I think that was maybe when Lion King came out or around about then. It was a really good year. We had autism diagnosis, autistic disorder. That was a big one. Then we had PDD-NOS, which is essentially you don't fit in any box, you go somewhere else. Then we have Asperger's disorder. Then we have a creative disorder. Then we have Rett disorder. If you've not heard of Rett, it's interesting because it's no longer considered part of the autistic spectrum. While the others were made redundant, Rett is still a thing. It just got moved into another category. You may have noticed here, high-functioning autism was never an official category in the DSM, yet it was one that was commonly used. It's similar to Asperger's, but is different from how it may be witnessed or seen. Here's a nice diagram which shows you the shift from the DSM-4 to the DSM-5. In 2013, the DSM-5 merged all the autistic subtypes into a single diagnosis, while Rett's was put somewhere else. Originally, we all had a pervasive developmental disorder. This was like the big umbrella. Then under it, you had your different types of autism. It wasn't useful. It was putting people in different boxes. If you were slightly in between, you didn't get support. Or if you had one, it would say, well, you have Asperger's. You probably aren't going to need the support for the autistic disorder. It wasn't helpful. So they decided, let's just call it autistic spectrum disorder. And then we have more freedom and flexibility to get the right support for the right person. The childhood one, they got rid of because they realized, wait a sec, it's with you your entire life. And Rett syndrome, it actually wasn't that similar to autism after all. After doing a little bit of genetic profiling, we're like, you know what? It's a thing, but it doesn't belong in this category. So let's shift it elsewhere. Moving on to the DSM-5. This is currently where we're at the moment. Autism spectrum disorder is the main one, but within that, you have levels. I don't overly like this, to be honest with you, but this is where we currently are. You've got level 1, level 2. It feels like a boss battle. You don't work your way up the ladder. You don't start on level 1 and then progress to level 2. Essentially, what this is referring to is support needs. It sounds like you're going to Nando's and getting some, can I have some lemon and herb chicken, like spicy, medium, mild. That's one of the reasons I'm not keen on it. It does, however, help you more. Like when I go into schools and I'm supporting their children, if they just tell me, oh, our kids have autism, it's really difficult to plan the session. If they say, oh, I've got level 2, level 3, I have a little bit of a guidelines in how I might want to cater the session. In an ideal world, I'd have individual profiles for each student, but if that's not possible, this does actually help me. While I don't like it, I do see the helpful in it. Changelings. We have been called a lot of things in history. This is the DSM, and here's a good overview of it. Ooh, information overload. But you can see how it has changed throughout the years, through the 80s, 90s, and 2010s. Who knows when the next version's going to come out? It does change and evolve as our awareness grows. But people are very slow at adapting and growing. So our understanding of autism is stuck in the past, and it's taken a long time to shift over to the new model. Stacey says, is it possible to have math/self-taught social skills so much that you don't really notice the social deficits anymore as an adult? Yeah, I would say the good way of understanding that is you've got your natural abilities and learned abilities. Your natural abilities, are you naturally good at communicating? Is it going to be something that you find easy to go throughout your life? And then your learned abilities are things you can learn. Now, you can learn to do anything in your life. There really are no barriers or things that are going to block you. The amount of energy that goes into learning those skills may have a higher resource needs than those who say don't have autism. That's how I look at it anyway. Let's look at the ICD. And this is the WHO, the World Health Organization version. This is what we use in the UK. We're currently on the ICD 11. Let's go back to the 10 at the moment. Asperger's was a thing. High functioning also never existed in it. It wasn't ever an official thing. Important to know, it's not that we've gotten rid of the term. It never really was a term. Asperger's, which is probably the nearest equivalent, well, again, isn't a one-for-one, also got removed. While the DSM and the ICD are different documents, they do heavily support each other. They're not like a complete contradiction. The newest one is only from 2002, so still pretty new. Asperger's is part of the spectrum. So while you would never get diagnosed with Asperger's, it's just given more nuance or maybe more flexibility. Reflects a unified approach to autism classification, emphasizes spectrum concept over subtypes. Again, if we have subtypes, there's a threshold. You either are or you aren't. If you are really close, you might slightly miss out. A spectrum is saying, you know what, it's fluid and arguably more helpful. What exactly is next for autism? Maybe it could be autism spectrum condition. This is the current term, which a lot of people use, which isn't an official term. Bear in mind, not official, but people do use it. Is this the new high functioning? The label made by the people for the people? Or is this a term that eventually might become official? Now, they are the exact same thing, but they have different connotations. Autism spectrum disorder is a clinical term. It's in the diagnostic manual, so it's backed by science. It's also used in research. ASD is growing in popularity. More people are using it. It's arguably less negative because disorder, condition, it promotes acceptance. It's kind of hard to accept something which is called a disorder. Then we got in the middle one, just bog standard autism. Why do we need to give it any more clarification than that? See, most of you say ASD, and again, not an official term, but it's one that people are voluntarily choosing to go along with. Then we've got, what do we actually call people with autism? They all mean the same. They all are the same thing, but they all have very different connotations. Let's start off with, we've got lives with autism. Then we got suffers from autism, like you've just been stabbed in the heart with a little bit of autism and it's chronically painful. While some people do struggle with autism, suffers is a little bit harsh for me. On the spectrum, it's like you're riding that wave and you're having a great time. A person with autism, maybe like a little handbag and you're just carrying your autism where you go. Or an autistic person, it's inherently part of you. You can't really change that. I am not in a position to say which one's right or wrong. These, I think, come down to how you personally have experienced and resonate with XYZ. But I would say predominantly, most people tend to go with autistic person as a more progressive approach. In a clinical setting, people typically go with a person with autism. I would say the other ones are quickly becoming quite outdated. Every time I hear someone says suffers from autism, I cringe and die a little bit inside. If that's a personal thing, then you let me know. If any of you do are autistic, have autism on the spectrum, There is support available. Now, this is predominantly UK based, but do know there is help available. Thankfully, because AS is the go-to term, there isn't any of these organizations which say, we can't support you, because I guess you'd fall under all of it. I guess you can suffer with it. Then there's some book recommendations. I've mentioned these before, but I would say if you really want to understand the journey that we've been through in the change of terminologies, I would say The Autistic Brain, Uniquely Human, and Neurotribes are really good recommendations. Uniquely Human is a really good personal approach, and The Autistic Brain is a great case study of a particular individual. If you are autistic, you can get help in the UK at least. Feel free to come to us and we can get you through support in the workplace. If you're outside the UK, we can still do it. We just do like private reports. Do know you can get to us for help. Any questions on high functioning autism, or have we all agreed we've come on a bit of a journey? Ideally, maybe not use it going forward, but the choice is yours. I would say if you're talking about yourself, however you want to. If we're talking more generally, probably best not to use it going forward. I think learning to love and appreciate yourself includes seeing how neurodiversity makes me who I am. And I would be a completely different person otherwise. You know what, Stacey? I like that. Can you send a recording of this? You can go on our YouTube channel and find it yourself. If you do like today, check out our next one, which is Do I Have a Reading Disorder? We are going to be looking at the difference between a reading disorder and dyslexia. You can have a reading disorder and not have dyslexia. If you have dyslexia, you have a reading disorder. Do check that out. Go on our Eventbrite, see all the lovely stuff we have on offer. Oh, Jennifer Aniston. That's because she has dyslexia. See, all looks lovely. I'll be attending, obviously. Hopefully you do. Or we've got our YouTube channels. If you do want to watch this recording, literally just go on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe because everyone loves to subscribe. No, thank you so much for the lovely comments. It's always great to have all of you. We have a Facebook group for those with autism. It's a little bit dead at the moment, but hopefully we can revive it. We have neurodiversity characteristic quizzes. We have those on autism. So if you want to understand the characteristics of what was Asperger's or autism, check them out. Again, use it with a massive grain of salt, but they can still be a good starting point for a further discussion. We've got how to get in contact with us. admin@accept.co.uk or at exceptionalindividuals.com. If you want to get in contact, say hi, go on our website. There we are. All done for today. I hope you all found that useful and insightful. Sign up to next week's or future webinars, and I'll see you there. Thank you all so much for attending.